Life of Antony by Saint Athanasius. Part 9. And the fame of Antony came even unto kings, for Constantine Augustus and his sons Constantius and Constans, the Augusti, wrote letters to him as to a father, and begged an answer from him. But he made nothing very much of the letters, nor did he rejoice at the messages, but was the same as he had been before the emperors wrote to him. But when they brought him the letters, he called the monks and said, "Do not be astonished if an emperor writes to us, for he is a man, but rather wonder that God wrote the law for men, and has spoken to us through his own Son." And so he was unwilling to receive the letters, saying that he did not know how to write an answer to such things. But being urged by the monks, because the emperors were Christians, and lest they should take offense on the ground that they had been spurned, he consented that they should be read, and wrote an answer approving them because they worshipped Christ, and giving them counsel on things which pertained to salvation, not to think much of the present, but rather to remember the judgment that is coming, and to know that Christ alone was the true and eternal King. He begged them to be merciful, and to give heed to justice and the poor. And they, having received the answer, rejoiced. Thus he was dear to all, and all desired to consider him as a father. Being known to be so great a man, therefore, and having thus given answers to those who visited him, he returned again to the inner mountain, and maintained his wonted discipline. And often when people came to him as he was sitting or walking, as it is written in Daniel, he became dumb, and after a season he resumed the thread of what he had been saying before to the brethren who were with him. And his companions perceived that he was seeing a vision. For often when he was on the mountains he saw what was happening in Egypt, and told it to Serapion the bishop, who was indoors with him, and who saw that Antony was wrapped in a vision. Once, as he was sitting and working, he fell as it were into a trance, and groaned much at what he saw. Then after a time, having turned to the bystanders with groans and trembling, he prayed, and falling on his knees remained so a long time. And having arisen, the old man wept. His companions, therefore, trembling and terrified, desired to learn from him what it was. And they troubled him much until he was forced to speak. And with many groans he spoke as follows: "Oh, my children, it were better to die before what has appeared in the vision comes to pass." And when again they asked him, having burst into tears, he said, "Wrath is about to seize the church, and it is on the point of being given up to men who are like senseless beasts. For I saw the table of the Lord's house, and mules standing around it on all sides in a ring, and kicking the things therein, just like a herd kicks when it leaps in confusion. And you saw," he said, "how I groaned, for I heard a voice saying, 'My altar shall be defiled.'" These things the old man saw, and after 2 years the present inroad of the Arians and the plunder of the churches took place, when they violently carried off the vessels and made the heathen carry them, and when they forced the heathen from the prisons to join in their services, and in their presence did upon the table as they would. Then we all understood that these kicks of the mules signified to Antony what the Arians, senselessly, like beasts, are now doing. But when he saw the vision, he comforted those with him, saying, "Be not downcast, my children, for as the Lord has been angry, so again will he heal us, and the Church shall soon again receive her own order, and shall shine forth as she is wont. And you shall behold the persecuted restored, and wickedness again withdrawn to its own hiding place, and pious faith speaking boldly in every place with all freedom. Only do not defile yourselves with the Arians, for their teaching is not that of the apostles, but that of demons, and their father the devil. Yea, rather it is barren and senseless, and without light of understanding, like the senselessness of these mules." Such are the words of Antony. And we ought not to doubt whether such marvels were wrought by the hand of a man. For it is the promise of the Saviour when he says, "If you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, Remove hence, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." And again, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, if you shall ask the Father in my name, he will give it you. Ask, and you shall receive." And he himself it is who says to his disciples and to all who believe in him, "Heal the sick, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give." Antony, at any rate, healed not by commanding, but by prayer and speaking the name of Christ, so that it was clear to all that it was not he himself who worked, but the Lord, who showed mercy by his means and healed the sufferers. But Antony's part was only prayer and discipline, for the sake of which he stayed in the mountain, rejoicing in the contemplation of divine things, but grieving when troubled by much people, and dragged to the outer mountain. For all judges used to ask him to come down, for it was impossible for them to enter on account of their following of litigants. But nevertheless they asked him to come, that they might but see him. When therefore he avoided it, and refused to go to them, they remained firm, and sent to him all the more the prisoners under charge of soldiers, that on account of these he might come down. Being forced by necessity, and seeing them lamenting, he came into the outer mountain. And again his labor was not unprofitable, for his coming was advantageous and serviceable to many, and he was of profit to the judges, counseling them to prefer justice to all things, to fear God, and to know that with what judgment they judged, they should be judged. But he loved more than all things his sojourn in the mountain. At another time, suffering the same compulsion at the hands of them who had need, and after many entreaties from the commander of the soldiers, he came down, and when he was come, he spoke to them shortly of the things which make for salvation, and concerning those who wanted him, and was hastening away. But when the Duke, as he is called, entreated him to stay, he replied that he could not linger among them, and persuaded him by a pretty simile, saying, "Fishes, if they remain long on dry land, die, and so monks lose their strength if they loiter among you and spend their time with you. Wherefore, as fish must hurry to the sea, so must we hasten to the mountain, lest haply, if we delay, we forget the things within us. And the general, having heard this and many other things from him, was amazed, and said, Of a truth, this man is the servant of God. For unless he were beloved of God, from where could an ignorant man have such great understanding? And a certain general, Belasius by name, persecuted us Christians bitterly on account of his regard for the Arians, that name of ill omen. And as his ruthlessness was so great that he beat virgins and stripped and scourged monks, Antony at this time wrote a letter as follows, and sent it to him. I see wrath coming upon thee. Wherefore cease to persecute the Christians, lest haply wrath catch hold of thee. For even now it is on the point of coming upon thee. But Belasius laughed, and threw the letter on the ground, and spit on it, and insulted the bearers, bidding them tell this to Antony. Since thou takest thought for the monks, soon I will come after thee also. And 5 days had not passed before wrath came upon him. For Belasius and Nestorius, the prefect of Egypt, went forth to the first halting place from Alexandria, which is called Cairo. And both were on horseback, and the horses belonged to Belasius, and were the quietest of all his stable. But they had not gone far toward the place when the horses began to frisk with one another, as they are wont to do. And suddenly the quieter, on which Nestorius sat, with a bite dismounted Belasius, and attacked him, and tore his thigh so badly with his teeth that he was borne straight back to the city, and in 3 days he died. And all wondered, because what Antony had foretold had been so speedily fulfilled. Thus, therefore, he warned the cruel. But the rest who came to him he so instructed that they straightway forgot their lawsuits, and felicitated those who were in retirement from the world. And he championed those who were wronged in such a way that you would imagine that he and not the others was the sufferer. Further, he was able to be of such use to all that many soldiers and men who had great possessions laid aside the burdens of life, and became monks for the rest of their days. And it was as if a physician had been given by God to Egypt. For who in grief met Antony, and did not return rejoicing? Who came mourning for the dead, and did not forthwith put off his sorrow? Who came in anger, and was not converted to friendship? What poor and low-spirited man met him, who, hearing him and looking upon him, did not despise wealth, and console himself in his poverty? What monk, having been neglectful, came to him, and became not all the stronger? What young man, having come to the mountain and seen Antony, did not forthwith deny himself pleasure, and love temperance? Who, when tempted by a demon, came to him and did not find rest? And who came troubled with doubts, and did not get quietness of mind? For this was the wonderful thing in Antony's discipline, that, as I said before, having the gift of discerning spirits, he recognized their movements, and was not ignorant whither any one of them turned his energy and made his attack. And not only was he not deceived by them himself, but cheering those who were troubled with doubts, he taught them how to defeat their plans, telling them of the weakness and craft of those who possessed them. Thus each one, as though prepared by him for battle, came down from the mountain, braving the designs of the devil and his demons. How many maidens who had suitors, having but seen Antony from afar, remained maidens for Christ's sake. And people came also from foreign parts to him, and like all others, having got some benefit, returned, as though set forward by a father. And certainly when he died, all, as having been bereft of a father, consoled themselves solely by their remembrances of him, preserving at the same time his counsel and advice. End of Part 9.